Let me introduce our guest this afternoon. He probably needs no introduction, but allow me to try. An engineer, a musician, a computer programmer, software designer. I think the list goes on, Seán. A war photographer when I was looking at your bio, so I'm going to come back and ask you about that. Venture capitalist and writer. So good afternoon to Seán O'Sullivan, Managing General Partner of SOSV. Seán, thanks for joining us.
Good afternoon. It's great to meet you, Conor.
And where are you today, Seán?
I'm in San Francisco.
San Francisco. Well, thank you for getting up early-ish to join us and to come in today. What did I miss in the intro? What else have you covered in this broad career of yours?
When you're 57 years old, you don't want the whole life-long catalog listed.
Yeah, I looked at the musician. You were in a band. You had a couple of albums. Is there anything you haven't done thus far, Seán? Or what's left still for you to do?
Life is full of mysteries, and I am constantly exploring those new mysteries, mostly in the form of helping startups in their journeys.
Very good. We'll get to that. I'm really looking forward to it. Can I ask you first just a little bit about you? So given that background, at your core, are you an engineer or have you moved on since?
Yeah, I mean, you often get these questions on the tax form or on whatever sort of when you're going to the doctor's office, what's your profession? And I always put down engineer. I think engineering is at the root of problem solution, and engineering gives us the ability to have the greatest change in the world by scaling our ideas into reality.
But you've actually there's a lovely duality in your life, because when I was looking at your kind of academic background, you have a fine art master's and an engineering degree. How do you reconcile both sides of your brain with that piece? Well,
I think whenever you are approaching life, you have to consider all the suffering and all the conflict and all the education that you have, and just apply every tool you have in your tool set to what's at hand. Every day we make choices, an infinite array of choices as to how to try to, make a greater impact on the room that surrounds us, or the street that surrounds us, or the city that surrounds us, or the world that surrounds us. And you have to call on all of yourself, not just the things you learned at university, but also the things you're trying to bring to awaken in the potential that you see around you.
Because you have this lovely twin track where you're on one side, you've the angel, and we'll talk about it, your career, an angel investor, then leading up to SOSV and that big organization. And on the other side, you've also a very strong track around humanitarian work and actually that piece around giving back. So every time I look at you, and as I was preparing for this, you've kind of got those both sides going on within you.
Yeah, well, I relate to how I grew up and how the challenges I faced and the problems I see and the gaps that need to be filled in the world. And I do try to bring as much of the awareness of the art as well as the scalable engineering technologies to any problem I try to address. It's not just about the content of what you see, it's about the processes that you adapt to try to create change in the world. And I spend a lot of time trying to optimize the process of how I operate in the world to have the greatest impact, and not how but also how our entire organization at SOSV, 130 strong. As a VC, that's actually a large VC. There's not that many VCs, over around 6 or 10 people. So we have a special duty to try to increase our impact because of our size and the funds that we have under management.
Thank you. You're co-credited with the invention of the term cloud computing. Along with, I think it was George Favaloro at Compaq. So give me some background to that. Right. I mean, because today cloud computing is just a standard, but how did you, I suppose I'm interested in that thought process to envisage cloud computing.
Well, everything is in when you look at a problem, sometimes you have to abstract it. And when you, in order to understand what the direction is that is the unstoppable force in the marketplace, and the thing that will take the world forward. You have to find these unstoppable trends. And at the time that I came up with that term, there was this thing called client server computing that was in play. And before that, there was local area networks, and then before that was your own personal computer. We were moving to a different phase in how everything was going to run, and I noted that, and I created an expression around it. The expression is kind of obvious in a way, but everybody's confused about why is it cloud computing. But it does come from some terminology that had been previously used in the telco world, where everything that was done on customer premises was called CPE, or customer premises equipment, and everything that was done inside the public switch network was called the cloud. And simply by adapting the cloud plus computing to it, that's the root of how the expression came up. There's more complications to it, but that's
it seems remarkably simple when you explain it like that, looking back maybe 20 years from a remove of 20 years later.
Yeah.
Can I, and by the way, to our audience, we're very happy to take questions. We have a couple that were sent in beforehand, and we're obviously happy to take them, and we'll curate them as we go through. Can I ask about the arc of your career, Seán? And what I'm interested in is how does somebody leave college in 1984 and end up running a venture fund with, as you say, 130 kind of employees, $1 billion in assets under management, and the amount of applications you get each year. So how would you describe that career as you look back in it now? And was it planned? Did it happen by chance, by accident? Was there a grand design when Seán was stepping out of college?
There was no grand design. I just face the problems that are in front of me and try to make a difference along the way. That's probably what's led me to having such a varied career. The reason I went back to the computing and tech area is because that's where I felt I had the greatest gift after the music industry and after journalism and photography. And I also had a child, and I wanted to see my child see me. I have 2 children now, and I wanted to have them have a reference of working really hard at something that was worth doing. So I didn't want to just lay about on some beach somewhere. I did have some early success, and I didn't need to work as hard as I do. Often people tell me I don't need to work as hard as I do. I'm often chastised for it. But I do find great joy in being of service to the things I care about.
Right. I'm going to come back later on if I have time, because there is this kind of movement, particularly around the US, the kind of this great resignation and the notion of work and enjoying work versus being forced to go to work. And if I have time, I'm going to come back to that. But I do want to ask you, as and you mentioned early successes, 1992 with MapInfo moving to SOSV. Did you consciously set out to say, you could have stopped and, as you said, lay on the beach. Did you say to yourself, there are problems to be addressed and I'm going to go about addressing them? Or was it, I found my way into it because I had made some money and I'll reinvest some and I'll see where this goes?
Oh, it was a little bit of both. So in terms of, creation of, So when my first company went public, and I think it was 1994, actually, so I was then around 27. And so it went public, and it was actually a very heartrending thing, especially I grew up in absolute poverty. So, having $1 million or, I think it was initially around 14 or $1 million that at the IPO, which actually these days seems like a really small number. But for me, it was an unbelievably huge number. And I would watch the stock go up and down throughout the day, and I'd be up $2 million in the afternoon and down $3 million in the next morning or whatever. And it was so disconnected to the actual work that I was doing, that it actually made me, physically kind of sick, to not, to be just tracking that and to be tracking it all the time. And I can't understand people who really, I can understand it, the day trading aspects and all those sort of, I'm a long-term investor. I find that if you get in at the right stage and then you just let it, not just let it, you work actively to try to make a difference in making the outcome, better every day. That's the thing to look at. It's not to look at what your bank account is worth or what your net worth is any day. It's just to be sticking to the task at hand, to try to make the world around you a little bit better every moment. And so what got me into investing directly into startups is I realized that the money was a part of myself. It was a part of what I did. And I didn't feel that just leaving it in the stock market was is certainly better than buying a house with it or something. But I didn't feel that it was as productive as actually trying to create new things out of it. And so the best way to create new things out of those resources was to invest directly in people who are trying to solve problems and trying to bring change to the world. And so that's what I did. I invested in some of my friends that I knew or acquaintances in the Boston tech scene or in the New York tech scene. And then, as it happened over many years, those results did, extremely well. And then I was managing hundreds of millions of dollars of my own money through the progression of time, by just investing in people that I knew and cared about. And at that point, I needed to build an organization, which is what I've done in SOSV, that could affect these changes to try to bring the world forward in the directions that I've noted are going to be of greatest need to humanity.
Lovely, and I'm looking forward to getting into those. Can I just ask you about an entrepreneur? So we have 600 people have registered to join us here today to hear you talk, and they're at various stages. They're building startups, they're scaling. The characteristics of the entrepreneur, and we hear a lot about this. And is it glib to say that you need to show, curiosity or tenacity? Is it too glib to try and characterize an entrepreneur in a couple of kind of characteristics?
No, those are great characteristics, and there's more. You have to. I think you also just have to have your ear to the ground and be really, really aware of the pain spots in the marketplace that need to be addressed. And probably most successful entrepreneurs are not in it actually for the money. I mean, the money will come if they affect great change in the world, and if their solution to the problems are well framed, and if they are able to scale their ability to deliver those solutions to the market. But you have to solve a really urgent pain point for a customer in order for you to be able to succeed. So you need somebody who's a really good listener and somebody who's really going to be incredibly motivated to see the gaps that are in the world as they exist today, and then fill in those gaps with really concrete solutions. And that's, to me, the biggest thing about an entrepreneur is they're completely unsatisfied with the status quo, and they have this religious fervor or a passion to change the market in its in whatever way, whether that's in creating some new computing device or creating cures for various types of human diseases, or creating climate change sort of technologies that can improve what our outcome and should be, either for a small group of people. You don't have to be looking at the whole world, or for a or for the planetary health needs and the human health needs.
Okay, so it's a curiosity, or it's an unwillingness to accept the status quo and to say, just because this is how it's always been doesn't mean this is how it is going to be. And I think that notion of continuing to push and continuing to kind of test the boundaries around it, I guess, is where we're at. Can I move to SOSV? And we mentioned you've probably $1 billion worth of assets under management at the moment. It's one of the largest kind of VC firms, if that's the right way to describe it, at the moment. What's your...
Well, actually, we're it's a little over $1 billion. It's probably $1.1 billion or $1.2 billion or something at this day. But actually, we're not in the one of the largest in terms of total assets. There's about 50 firms globally that are. We are one of the most active, and certainly we're the, often quoted as either the most active or in the top 3 most active VCs globally because of the number of investments that we make. And we're making our investments at very, very early stages. We're generally the first professional investor, and that's what sort of distinguishes SOSV. We are the only investor that operates the way that we do in the world in so many territories, with a focus on deep tech solutions and hardware and life sciences.
So explain it to me then, your philosophy. So what are you trying to achieve with SOSV?
Well, you're as someone who's not satisfied with the status quo, you're looking to fill in those gaps, provide opportunity. I think back to when my first company, when I created my first company right out of university. I just graduated. And I really, wanted to solve this problem of, creating street maps on computers. I don't know why I was so driven to do that, but that was the thing that got me going. And I by myself had no chance of making that change in the world. Just one person has no chance of making a change in the world. What you have to do is attract around you other like-minded people who believe in that mission, and then attract. Sometimes you have to attract funding. Sometimes you just need to attract customers who are dedicated or have a need that your technology solves, and then you scale that. But that takes a team. That takes building all of this. And by myself, I was, I wouldn't have been able to do very much. So I had a couple of people that really helped me. Mentors, people that had already run and created businesses. That had scaled them to tens of millions of dollars, or been, one guy, Warren Brueggemann, was a senior vice president of General Electric, was running a multi-billion-dollar organization. Harry Abkarian was running like a $60 million startup, which was a lot of money back in those days. And, and so they gave of their time just to advise me on hey, this is how, and they gave me some seed capital as well. And, they joined the board of my company, MapInfo, that the guidance, that mentorship, allowed us to thrive and to know what to do next. How to, what is a cap table? I had no idea what a cap table was. How do you raise capital? How do you close a corporate sale? What are the processes that are necessary to take the company forward? And just having really good advisors. So in some ways, it's just getting back to the problem I suffered with as a 21-year-old to try to make a difference in the world. That's all SOSV is doing these days. But we're just doing it at scale and against a certain problem set with people who are like-minded, who really want to see the change happening in the world. And that's the organization and the culture that attracts people to SOSV. Some quarters we're ranked the most active investor in the world. And certainly in some markets we're more active than in others. I think we're the number 6th most active investor in India. The number 2 most active investor in Pakistan. In the US we're often ranked as number 1 or 2 or 3. Most active investor. So we're just scattered all around the world trying to make a difference.
Trying to make a difference.
Yeah.
And you said there in your intro that your difference comes from probably that you're at the very early stage. You're happy to go in early with startups to solve the big problems that we're facing in the world. Is that a fair assessment?
Well, I think, what we're able to do that most don't, especially when you manage more capital, is that we are able to take outside risk, really outsized risk that, most people when the more money they manage, the more they focus on the later stages, like the Series B rounds and the Series C rounds, et cetera. If you're managing $1 billion, how do you deploy all that capital? We are happy investing in several hundred investments a year, 130 brand new companies and follow-on rounds into the companies we've already backed. And so, that's a different strategy than how most VCs would operate. And I think the greatest joy is in helping create that foundation of a business. But what that greater risk means is that we also have a great failure rate. And I guess I'm not afraid of failure. And it's a hard thing for the entrepreneur in every journey. But most entrepreneurs are going to be struggling all the time with failure, and sometimes their companies will fail. So we recognize that. I just looking at some numbers the other day, and if a company makes it to Series A that goes through the whole SOSV process, the odds are almost 100% that they will continue going on to Series B and Series C. And there's very little failure rate once you get to those later stages, but there's lots of failure rate until you get to those initial, until you have a product that's ready for the market and the market is buying that product. And that's the challenge that takes an incredible amount of courage, and we're just trying to help in that particular part of the journey. That's the biggest focus that we have, is in helping entrepreneurs on that part of that journey. And we only take part of the world that we're particularly dedicated to, where we're the world's most active investors in life sciences, and we're the world's most active investor in hardware. We're particularly dedicated to those areas, and we're particularly dedicated to the three themes of human health, planetary health, and the industrial regeneration, effectively, managing our new economies, particularly as it relates to the reindustrialization of the West.
Okay. You mentioned there the SOSV process, and that by going through that SOSV process, it enhances your chances of success. What is the SOSV process?
Well, we have these startup development programs, and many people, we used to call them accelerators, and there still are a lot of accelerator programs that are around in the world. People can join our programs and sort of skip the accelerator stage if they're able to get in. Now, we get 8,000, 9,000 applications a year. It's not that easy to get in. It's maybe a 1.5% or 2% chance to be able to get into our startup development programs. But we typically give, $250,000 or $500,000 in our first check. And we also have these physical facilities and the large teams that are helping our startups at those phases. So if you were to join HACS, for example, our hardware startup development program, you'd either go to our new facility in Newark, New Jersey, or you'd go to our facility in Tokyo, or in Xi'an, or in Shenzhen. And we have a team of engineers and designers and product management people and that can help in every aspect, from the industrial engineering, the design, to electrical or power, or all. We've actually helped 250 hardware companies get created, so we know a lot about how and what it takes to reduce your bill of materials, and how to manufacture effectively, and how to get your company financed by the people who know and invest in hardware companies. And we have a facility of we have facilities of 30,000, 40, 50,000 square feet, where we staff it with our own staff of dozens of people, and and hundreds of entrepreneurs that are working alongside the entrepreneur that we're backing. So it's a vibrant ecosystem that we've created in that area, and we've done the same in IndieBio with life sciences, with wet lab facilities that cost us literally tens of millions of dollars to build these facilities out. It's a very unique approach. Before SOSV, no VC really, well, I'm not sure if none, but it's so rare that, it's pretty close to no VC had ever actually built out a facility for to enable their startups who are just getting a couple $100,000 to actually go straight into the lab and get the scientific results that they need to get, give them the money that they can do, say, animal or mouse studies or whatever else they need to do to prove the scalability of their processes, and get running so quickly. So we found that by making our startups not have to spend so much money on the CapEx and just spending the money on the OpEx, with us providing all the sort of facilities and background staff, it really enabled our startups to go further and faster. And we're still the only VC in the world that has this approach. And, it resonates with some people.
Very good. It's an interesting question because an audience question came up, and it was about that software companies seem to be easier to set up and to fund versus hardware companies, and hardware companies struggle to kind of find the funding. You've gone at it kind of differently. That I see you smiling. Hardware companies have a particular attraction to you.
Yeah, I guess you could consider it a character flaw. Like, I always go after very difficult problems. And partly because I think there's so, yes, you can start up a software startup in your garage or, at your desk. But if you really are doing something in these spaces, you really need a lot more help. And these ecosystems have so much more benefit than they can offer. So it is a differentiation. We also have our cross-border programs in Taipei, Shanghai, and India that are geared more towards the traditional software marketplaces. That focuses more, and in blockchain as well. And those programs are also, very notable programs. But around 3/4 of our investment is in the sort of the deepest of deep tech areas, which are the more hard problems to solve. Yeah.
So our audience, don't give up. You're on the right track with the hardware one. Can I move or change track slightly, Seán? And can I talk about this planetary health mission? And you mentioned these 3 big buckets that you're focusing on. At a high level, what are the big issues to be addressed from your perspective?
Well, I mean, you just look at planetary health as primarily a climate change problem and primarily an issue. I mean, there are other issues with pollution and all of those things, but if you have the right, right approach with planetary health, you're often solving multiple problems at the same time with your approach. The areas that we look at for planetary health and as it relates to climate change are, you can read the book from Bill Gates, How to Avoid a Climate Disaster. It gives a pretty good categorization of how we basically need to reimagine every industry and start over so that we can have a decarbonized industrial planetary environment. And that means that goes from everything from agriculture, which contributes 19% of our greenhouse gases, to transportation, which is 16%, up to the biggie, manufacturing itself, which is 31% of our greenhouse gases are created through manufacturing processes. And I think it's 27% in energy, production. Ireland is doing a great job in some of those energy areas, for example, and reducing through sustainable sources like wind and waves and not so much sun, unfortunately. But using sustainable energy, productions, and that contributes hugely. And then so every industry that is doing any of those things, and also including heating and cooling of buildings, et cetera, every industry needs to really go at it with a different approach in order to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions. So when we look at agriculture, the biggest, harmful agent in that is actually animal-based farming. And I know that there are a lot of animal farmers in animal husbandry, in Ireland, and it's probably very hard to hear that. But there are obviously more cows and sheep in Ireland than there are humans, and these are producing very large levels of methane, which is contributing hugely to our global warming problem. So what we've done, for example, is trying to eliminate animal agriculture where possible. And I wouldn't say eliminate. We're just trying to make the options better. So I think there will always be 10% of the market that wants to use a more expensive, animal-based product. But I think we can win over 90% of the market with higher safety, higher quality, and more sustainable, less harmful processes for creating the products that we normally would turn to slaughter of animals or of using animal husbandry to generate those products, whether that be milk or meats or other types of proteins that we generate from animals. That doesn't make me I totally respect, and I was a meat eater myself until 6 or 7 years ago when I realized I didn't need to do that. But we ourselves, I think, recognize that you have to change behaviors of people if you want to change our planetary survival and our planetary health. And so what we're doing is we're providing very, very good economical and safety benefits to choosing healthier food choices which do not involve animals in the creation of those.
And it has been described, well, like what you're describing there, Seán, is a reimagining of the future of the planet and the way that we live, the way that we eat, the way that we heat ourselves, the way that we survive on this little island or this little planet of ours. And it could also be for the entrepreneurs who are on this call, it can also be described as this 100 trillion opportunity. I mean, within what you've described there are massive business opportunities that are arising.
Yeah. No. So I've been talking about the 500 to 1,000 unicorns that are going to be coming out of this, reimagining of our climate, reimagining of all of our industries so that we can have a sustainable planet. Because basically, every time you address the problem so fundamentally, the existing incumbent players, unless they move quickly, and generally incumbent players do not move quickly, their businesses are going to be very disrupted by the entrepreneurs that can courageously go in and reimagine the world in this way. So we would see every industry, every major industry that's currently a greenhouse gas producer being extremely susceptible to change. And we've seen it even with in the energy area. We've seen it with solar energy in the last 15 years, when solar energy was one of the most expensive and inefficient ways, from a cost perspective to generate electricity. And now it's it is the most affordable means of producing electricity that has ever been known to humankind in all of human history in just 15 years. So it's gone from being super expensive, like 85 cents a kilowatt hour, to less than 2 cents a kilowatt hour. And that means it beats everything. It beats liquid natural gas. It beats, certainly beats the heck out of coal, by factors. It's so much cheaper to generate electricity in sustainable ways. And wind has also come down hugely as well. So you can see over the period of a relatively short period that, massive change is possible. You just need to get on the right side of that curve and be working as hard as possible to move the needle away from harmful harmful mega trends.
And for the entrepreneur, timing is everything. And are we on the cusp of that big change now? In other words, is the time now or to seize those opportunities?
No, you're absolutely right. Timing is critical. Like I've been on the wrong side of that myself, where I've thought, hey, we're going to have this new technology. People are going to adapt it. And I've been out by 3 or 5 years. And if you're willing to wait the 3 or 5 years without scaling until the market is ready for you, then you could have a massive change in the world. If you're patient enough and you don't draw down too much capital, or you're not getting too much impatient investor capital in your business until you're sort of proving out that the market is there, then you'll be okay. If you scale up too quickly, then your runway will be very short, and you will not be able to continue, operating your business. You'll lose by coming into a marketplace too early.
And the notion, Seán, or the idea of patient capital, in other words, the traditional VC model says we invest, you go and prove it, we exit, and it all happens nicely within 5 to 7 years. In the new world that you're talking about, the investment horizon for the VC must surely be longer than your traditional 5 to 7 year.
Well, yeah, I mean, everybody wants to make an investment and 5 or 7 years later have the money come back to them. And at certain stages, if you're investing in, say, a Series C round or Series B round, that may happen for you. So you're investing in a company that's already a unicorn, already over $1 billion valuation. And then they have to have liquidity events after that. And you may only have to wait 3 or 5 years for that to happen or so. But if you're starting from the ground up, and if you're investing even in Series A companies, these Series A funds are often, they started with the intent of returning the money after 5 or 7 years. But in reality, most VC funds last for 15 years, 16 years. That's the average length of a VC fund. So it's not quite as quick as everybody makes it out to be. And partly there's some that move extremely fast. But I would, if I was setting the expectations for a founder, I'd say, be prepared, 100% prepared to spend the next 7 years of your life struggling to get through the muck.
I suppose
there's a lot of muck to have to struggle with.
But my question was more, I suppose, about the investor, that in other words, the returns are going to take longer because the science has got to be developed and the tech has got to be developed in this new world that we're living in. So the idea that the investors, while their funds, may be looking for some early returns, arguably that's going to be a longer period of time.
Well, yeah, and some investors have ways around that, like selling into secondaries and things like that along the way, where they buy in early and then they sell out at, say, a Series B or Series C round. You're right. Is a long horizon unless you're coming in at the much later stages, and you have to be very, very, very patient with it. The good news is that the asset value is increasing at unbelievable rates. I mean, we've just come off the best quarter of the best year that we've ever had, and the year before that was the best year we'd ever had. So, it's hard to look at this and say that you're not seeing progress, and that everyone who's an LP in what you're doing. I mean, the whole marketplace has been extremely lucky in the last couple of years with not lucky, but there's been huge gains in the last couple of years, despite the challenges of COVID for most VCs.
Okay, I'm going to take an audience question, which is kind of interesting on what we were talking about, and it was the importance of the Sustainable Development Goals, the UN 17, I think, Sustainable Development Goals, in the context of startups, I suppose, as a framework for them to identify opportunity. Is that kind of a template to say within there are the opportunities of the future? I actually look at the opportunities in a much more concrete way. I mean, you could go at that approach. I would probably overlay the UN Sustainable Development Goals on top of whatever the
entrepreneurs' special skill set is in solving deep and challenging problems. So I would, if you have a vision and passion to create some new type of display technology or some new type of way of doing biomass generation or energy efficiency or something, then you'll find that afterwards you'll find that there are 3 or 5 or 7 sustainable development goals that apply to your mission. I think of it as an after the fact thing. As long as you are going after a market that matters. I don't think of it as the way I would start in developing my mission and who I'm trying to serve is to look at those areas. It could be a framework if you were sort of throwing out random seeds into the field as to figure out, maybe I could start there. But most entrepreneurs actually have already an area they're passionate about, that they're expert in, that they really want to see it make a change. And I would rather say that they would go at it from the reverse perspective.
Very good. Seán, we've about 5 minutes left, and thank you for your time. We're going to keep taking questions. Can I ask you, looking in, because you've got your office down in Cork, and hopefully hopefully we can see you over here sometime in the new year, and we can get you to one of our physical events if you come to visit the office. What is your take on the Irish entrepreneurial system at the moment? What are your guys telling you from the ground?
Yeah, well, I mean, we're a very active investor in Ireland. We have a special Ireland fund, and we've backed, I'd say, maybe 40 or so Irish companies over the years. I don't have the numbers off the top of my head. And some of those companies have done extremely well. The ones that do the best are the ones that are competing globally. Those Irish indigenous companies that are then, frankly, other companies that come from out anywhere in the world, business in Ireland, because of the opportunities in Ireland, and then use that as their launching pad for being world leaders. There are great things about being in Europe. There's lots of grant, money that comes for deep tech companies. There are challenges in Europe. It's difficult to get higher valuations for companies that are based in Europe or in Ireland, and so that it's still a great and leading market for startups, and you can see that with the success of so many Irish startups in the past. So we're going to continue to back great Irish startups, and we're seeing several of those companies with great success. And we're going to continue to partner our international partners with our Irish startups to help increase their stage on the world stage.
Very good. I have 2 questions left. One of our audience members, and we actually missed this, was healthcare. What's the big healthcare issue that if you were an entrepreneur you should be looking at and saying, I should focus on this? What's your take?
Well, for me, most of the healthcare issues, need to have this sort of feedback loop in them. And we've seen this with devices like glucose monitors, where you can actually put a patch on your shoulder and measure continuously what your glucose levels are. And therefore, the person who's using those technologies, which are effectively, creating feedback loops through cloud-connected devices that are able to monitor progress and then feedback to the human or to their caregiver as to how to optimize the treatment or how to get them through their suffering or their disease. So that is one of the big challenging areas. And then there's lots of molecular biology approaches that we look at in healthcare to optimize and to really, to take breakthroughs in discovery and then try to validate those and run them through the very, very long sort of FDA process of getting a drug approved. But there are some incredibly important technologies in these areas that are transforming. And I think all of us relate to the fact that we have those in our lives that are suffering from from physical maladies. My mom died of Alzheimer's. My son suffers with autism. There's so much that we can do for these diseases and so many other diseases. I've had a good Irish friend who died a year or two ago who, had this glioblastoma, a cancer of the brain. And it's just awful to see these diseases continuing when we can actually make a change and we can stop these diseases from their progression. So the science is all there. It's just a matter of money and systems and working the way through the system to get these solutions and these cures to market.
Fantastic. Seán, we've about 30 seconds left. And if you were leaving college today, and you were starting a new venture, what would you focus on today?
Well, I would start before college. I'd probably start when I was around 14, which is what I did. And I'd start working in the field that I wanted to make the difference in. In my case, it was computing and programming. But frankly, I think if I had as much interest in biology, then I do think that computing is obviously going to be a great way of improving effectiveness going forward. But biology is really the science of this century that we're in, and all the machines and all the capabilities and all the enablements that we can create in reimagining the world through biology is probably the area I personally would have tried to counsel myself to do, knowing what I know now.
Fantastic. Seán, thank you so much for your time today. We appreciate you coming on from San Francisco to talk to us, and hopefully we'll get to see you in Ireland some stage early next year. Maybe we might get to talk in person.
I will definitely. I have so many interests in Ireland. I'm on so many boards, etc., that I have to be in Ireland virtually most of the time. I guess you're in a lockdown right now in Ireland, or approaching one. So I'll be back as soon as possible.
We look forward to seeing you, and thanks so much for your time, and thanks for coming on today.
Thank you.
Some of the things that I picked out of that discussion were around this planetary mission that Seán's been talking about. And, really interesting there to hear that biology, if he was picking something today and he was coming out, it would be around biology, it would be around the science and the fact that, a lot of these diseases, a lot of what we have, we can actually cure. And that's kind of really interesting. I loved his insights on the size of the opportunity, the size of the fund that he's running, and the fact that he can move that from both this kind of big global picture right down into a local picture, and mentioning the fact that he has the office down in Cork, that he's ready to he's a very active investor here in Ireland. And I thought that was hugely interesting. And just to get a view of the fact that, as the world is changing, there is this great $1 trillion opportunity that he's describing in terms of how our world is changing and the next phase of investment that we're about to see. So hugely interesting there, and we thank Seán for his time.